Properly. Dear God, tell me I'm not sideways. Yes. It seems that the correct orientation is there. Can you hear me? Somebody post, please. Everything is good. Oh my God. Small miracles. Well, bear with me for just one moment. I'm going to go ahead and get this door closed. Good morning to some of you. Good evening to others. Welcome to yet another live stream on the Angry Astronaut. This particular live stream, I chose the topic as being Martian government, since we did not have enough time to have a vote on this particular topic, which our Patreon members usually do. I was ill, have mostly recovered at this point, and also got a video out yesterday, as many of you know. So we're going to be talking today about a subject that has come up a number of times during other live streams that we have done. How are Martian colonists going to govern themselves? And I did a little bit of thinking about this myself. I mean, if we're talking about colonial America, back in the 18th century, the British maintained their control over the colonies with a huge amount of distance in between the two nations, and also with a great deal of lag time if we're talking about communications and that sort of thing. So in any event, one thing I do need to point out is the questions and answers, comments, etc., are going to be restricted to Discord. And for the Discord supporters, which you can be a Discord supporter for $3 a month, the cost of one cup of coffee. Well, 1 cup of expensive coffee anyway per month. So in any event, if you'd like to participate, I had some difficulty in getting this chat shut off. So, some of you folks may be making contributions, but regrettably, this is something that I'm going to be keeping up with on Discord, because these folks have contributed to the channel, and I've made a commitment back to them to support me, and so I'm going to give back to them by allowing them to be part of the discussion. The rest of you are free to be part of the audience, and I encourage you to do that, and I love the fact that you're here. But I'll be taking questions and comments from Discord. So all of that having been said, I'm going to go straight into it. Yes, one of the Truman Show, one of my favorites. Thank you, another space nut. Okay, so I guess the first question is, Elon Musk has brought up his idea for a perfect Martian government as a direct democracy, with laws being passed by a 2/3 majority. In other words, it takes a 2/3 majority to pass a law, however, only a 1/3 majority to overturn a law. What is everyone's thought about that? Do we think that that's a doable thing with our current technology? We certainly can do direct democracy. We do online voting all the time on a lot of other subjects. So is that something that we could possibly do on Mars? It has never actually been attempted. Even in Athens, it was only land-holding male Athenians that could do it and nobody else. So we have never actually attempted that on a planet. So I'd like some input, please. Does anybody think that that can be done? And we have a couple of people typing right now. So just waiting up on those responses. At first, says Seeker of Knowledge, a colony will be more like a corporation or a military with a chain of command, at least at first. I would tend to agree if that is a NASA related colony, or it may turn out to be more like a corporation with Elon Musk being at the head. I would hope that it would change rather quickly. Otherwise, Elon Musk would become something of a dictator. But nevertheless, that is something that could happen. Hello to all the audience, by the way. I see that some of you are making comments and saying hi and that sort of thing. So I do want to acknowledge you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Lovely to see all of you. If you do want to participate and actually ask questions and that sort of thing, you know what to do. Go to the description, and there's a direct link to the Patreon system. And it's, as I say, it's a $3 charge for an entire month to participate in these, and I do 4 of them, so you can break that down to a less than $1 per session. So it's not too bad if you can afford it, but if you can't, I quite understand, and I'm happy to have you here anyway. Question, says FTL. Should systems or form of government be specialized based on technology? Answer, direct democracy is fundamentally flawed, so it is not a good baseline. So FTL does not like a direct democracy. Should forms of government be specialized based on technology? Are we saying that we have engineers voting one way and we have the cooks voting another way, and we have the surface explorers and the astrobiologists voting another way, controlling different aspects? Is that what you're saying, FTL? Yeah, FTL is talking about mob rule, and that is a drawback to it. And it's a problem that the Athenians had, actually, when they were in the Peloponnesian Wars with the Spartans. Every military decision had to be made by 500 guys, 500 freaking guys making decisions on military strategy. I mean, how could you even coordinate visits to the bathroom, you know? You can't coordinate 500 bladders, let alone 500 minds. And yet, that was one of the big drawbacks that they had, and probably one of the big reasons why they lost that war. So, at the same time, though, Sparta, who was waging war against Athens at the time, was a dictatorship. Some people have compared Sparta to North Korea in the way that they behaved and the way their government was set up, which isn't exactly ideal either. Government is a big problem. Seeker of Knowledge says, especially in life and death situations, somebody has to be in charge. So are we advocating something similar to a European parliamentary system, or something more like a United States republic, or a republic like they have in Mexico? We're not the only ones with a republic. Yes, indeed. This is Sparta! I had a feeling that would come up at some point after I talked about the Peloponnesian Wars. Okay, FTL says, any form of government that requires technology to work is not a good one. If your direct democracy system requires tech to work, then there is a bug or a hack. It will fall back to something more mundane. Perhaps. It depends on the size of the colony. If we're only talking about 1 million people, then, if you start stuffing the ballot box, that's something that could be pretty easily detected. Now, if you're talking about 1 billion people, then yeah, that's something that's going to be extremely difficult. Can Mars support 1 billion people? I mean, we're talking, I would say, many centuries in the future before we get to that point on Mars. But who knows? Who knows how quickly the population will grow. Neuralink, still speculative tech, and maybe using Neuralink to vote. That's an interesting idea. Fixing the people who are, in other words, helping out folks who are blind or deaf. Yes, that would be another advantage to Neuralink. Hello, Cyclonics. I believe that's the way I should be pronouncing that. You've made it to Q&A. Yay! Thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate your participation. Okay, so let's keep going. With mob rule, you could end up with the law of the jungle. Only the strong and the cunning will survive. Yes, there is an argument that could be made for that. I guess I'm a bit of an idealist. I'd like to think that the kinds of people that are going to go to Mars are going to be people motivated by something higher than the law of the jungle, simply because the law of the jungle suggests plain base survival. And if survival is what you care about, then why would you go to Mars in the first place? You go to Mars with the motivation of sustaining the future of the human species and also for scientific exploration. And then you teach your children the very same ideals. However, that being the case, yeah, it's entirely possible that it could end up with the law of the jungle, no question about it. However, in the law of the jungle, everybody depends on everybody else, when it comes to a Martian colony. All it would take is a small insurrectionist group to sabotage the life support systems to overthrow a dictator. So there's pluses and minuses to all of it. Okay, so agree with earlier comment, says FTL, military style structure like a ship until a large amount of civilians become part of the picture. Yeah, well, has a pseudo, military sort of structure. I mean, they operate more like a corporation than a military in many ways. But nevertheless, by the way, if you hear some noise in the background, there's folks doing some work next door and that sort of thing. I apologize for that. And also, I have my cat locked up. Okay. Neuralink, yes. Once again, yeah, Neuralink could be a big game changer in a lot of ways, certainly in terms of direct voting, but military or corporate staff initially. Yes, that's true. However, having been in the corporate world for more than 2 decades, actually closing in on 3 decades, man, that's got its drawbacks. You put that kind of power in the hands of a CEO, unless that CEO is an idealistic one, like Elon Musk, or the CEOs who founded some of the companies that I work for. A self-motivated CEO can screw over his underlings very, very quickly. I would say that there needs to be some accountability to the person in charge, a way of ejecting the person in charge from power should he try to exercise his authority a bit too much. That would be my opinion in any event. Maslow's hierarchy of needs must be baked into the government model. Oh, that's going to create some debate, no doubt. How much what do people need? What is it that we require? Do we even require money for food? Those sorts of things any longer? I mean, we certainly have enough food on Earth to provide for everybody, but on Mars, that's going to be an entirely different situation. So the law of supply and demand could make a very big difference at all. People will be people. There will be the thin veneer of civilization in the seedy underbelly, a part not seen by tourists, says Seeker of Knowledge. Very possible. I hope not. I really feel that anybody who makes the decision to go to Mars, who wants to go through all of that hardship and not have a great deal of gain in order to do it. I mean, there's not a huge amount of resources, exploitable resources on Mars. There is in the asteroid belt, but not a lot of exploitable resources on Mars that aren't elsewhere. I do believe that my cat may have escaped. If you bear with me for just one moment, I'm going to check on that. I was right. Sorry about that, guys. Clever little animal, my Juno. All right, let's keep this going. Will currency be necessary? Asks Cyclonics. Yeah, I'd say that that's a very open question. If people are doing pulling their weight, is there a necessity for currency? I mean, people need what they need in order to survive as long as they're contributing. Now, of course, what about the people who don't contribute? How do you penalize people who do that? Um, that's going to be a tough thing. One that I don't think that people who are part of the first generation of Martians are going to have a problem with. Everybody is going to have to pitch in order to survive. Survival is going to be impossible without everybody contributing to it. But nevertheless, yeah. Elon created PayPal with Mars in mind. You can't use cash tender on Mars. Very true. Very true. What are you going to base your cash on? So yeah, that's a very good point. The philosopher king will not work well in a closed society, so an idealistic leader will ultimately fail. Why are people wanting to go to Mars, says FTL? If the answer has anything to do with escaping from the human condition on Earth, then the reason is not altruistic. It is an escape, and therefore needs to be considered. Yes, I would, however, say that it's entirely possible that by the time Earth gets to that point, it would be in the interest of Martians to bar future colonization, as harsh as that may sound. I think that by the time Earth gets that bad, if Mars has a self-sustaining colony, they probably don't want hordes of desperate immigrants showing up at their doorstep. They're not going to be able to support them. And they certainly may have the ability to keep them out. I mean, we're talking tens of millions of miles away and an insane amount of money required to get them here. There are far easier ways of dealing with impoverished masses than spending billions of dollars on getting them to Mars, as harsh as that may sound. If things start getting that desperate on Earth, I would say shipping them off to Mars is probably not going to be the most ideal way of dealing with the impoverished masses. And once again, sounds very harsh, but if things get that nasty here, I would say that it's probably going to go that route. Excuse me, I get a dry throat very quickly. There will be imports and exports, so there will need to be some kind of economy, says a seeker of knowledge. Yes, that's true. Eugenius points out that everyone should never have a scarcity of anything because everyone is essential. That's true. At most, you could have a credit system, but everyone should have a minimum credit each month per week. Yeah, as long as they're holding up their end. Absolutely. I mean, everyone's going to have to pitch in to survive in a harsh environment like Mars. So I think that may change people's attitudes a bit. Think a cup of coffee and import, and what will it cost? Yeah, good point. It depends on whether or not we're able to make coffee, and I am starting to fall a bit behind. Bear with me for just one moment. Yeah, that's true. Now, of course, we will be able to grow coffee ultimately on Mars if we make use of the soil there and fertilize it properly and get rid of the perchlorates and that sort of thing. But yeah, it would be a very expensive thing. But we have actually experimented with a variety of different types of vegetables in the Martian regolith or something very similar to it, and almost all of it has turned out to be pretty much the same as what we grow here on Earth. It tastes pretty much the same. As a matter of fact, the university students at Villanova experimented with Martian beer, I believe. Ideas in tech will be primary exports, says Don Van Vliet. Yes, I would say so. I would say that those who go to Mars are going to be extremely technically savvy. They're going to have to be in order to make a successful colony where the environment is that harsh and that deadly. So technical spin-offs have always been part of the space program. So selling Martian technology to Earth, I think, is going to be a huge thing. I also think that mining the asteroid belt could be a substantial export to Earth. It's far easier to mine the asteroid belt from Mars than it is from Earth. So that could be a big part of their economy as well. Send one man to Mars, the cost is 10 billion. Send 1 million people to Mars, the cost is a few $100s, says Elon Musk. Yes, the more people we send, the less expensive this becomes. And the more likely it could be that we're going to send a lot of people. And yeah, we could have a Botany Bay kind of situation where we send the undesirables from Earth to Mars. But I think Mars is going to have a great deal of control over that. After all, you have to make the journey, and the Martians have a lot of different ways to ensure that a ship never lands successfully if they decide not to cooperate. So in any event, and of course that could turn nasty too. So if we're looking at a very dark future, yeah, things could turn pretty nasty. 0% unemployment, says Cyclonics. Yes, I would say that that's probably true, except perhaps for the very aged. I would say that perhaps they might be excluded from unemployment, but that's about it. I think everybody's going to have a role to play in a Martian colony. There's going to be a lot of work to do. How will Martian politics handle political divisions in a closed survival environment? Excuse me. Well, people are going to have to decide on whether or not to create these sorts of political parties anyway, whether or not they're going to bring their own political parties from Earth, or if they're going to create political parties of their own. And what are they going to be based on? What sort of decisions is the Martian government going to be making? Is it something that's going to require a party system? And how many parties? As we've seen in places like Italy, no offense to any Italian observers, things could get quite complicated if you have tons and tons of political parties. Excuse me, but at the same time, things can get very chaotic if you have only, or rather, things can get very corrupt if you have only two political parties, as we have seen in the United States, especially. Okay, so we're keeping on going. Clatters. You're new, I believe, to this forum. Thank you so much. Second generation of Mars colonists will dictate a lot about the future Mars government model. A lot will be decided on how much they have adopted their parents' same vision of populating Mars, or if they just want to return to Earth, or will they feel an undisputed sense of belonging to Mars? Well, one of the problems is that those who make the decision, those who are born on Mars, probably can't come back to Earth because of the gravity issues. Unless we find a way to solve this problem, it will be almost impossible for somebody born on Mars to deal with the massive gravitational differences that exist there. So yeah, the second generation of Martians are going to make a lot of the decisions. Some of them may be resentful of the fact that they were born in a place where they can't come back to Earth. If we can ultimately solve the gravitational problem, that of course will change a lot. FTL says, giving a minimum living expense to people without any expectation of effort in exchange will cause the lowest common denominator situation of human efficiency. Well, it all depends on their motivations. I would say that people have to contribute. There is a book called Artemis that was written by the same fellow who wrote The Martian, which talks about the necessity of people having to pitch in many cases in order to survive. I don't think there's going to be a lot of room for people who slack off in this kind of environment. But then again, it's hard to say. We need to make it enjoyable to be there, not just to grow potatoes, says ZZ Top. Yes, I agree. We definitely need that. It's a little outside the topic. Do you think the tiny people number on Mars will actually be able to out-innovate the billions on Earth, says FTL? Yes, as a matter of fact, I do. I think that Earth is so caught up in its national divisions and in all of the other bureaucratic red tape and everything else that we have to come up with in order to come up with new innovations, whereas the people on Mars are going to be able to innovate on a dime. And I think that they will be able to come up with innovations that we do not. It's just a personal opinion, but I do think. Secret knowledge is in any form of government that will be security, police, or law enforcement of some kind. Absolutely. We are going to need police. We're going to need people who enforce the law, and we're also going to have to decide how they enforce the law. The use of firearms is something that's probably going to be very, very impractical, obviously, because you start shooting off firearms, you're going to start blasting holes in your habitation, and that means instant death. So yeah, I think that any law enforcement is going to have to be very careful with how they handle it. Less gravity, who knows what kinds of resources, says ZZ Top. Eugenius says, it is my opinion that people with a criminal background and mental health issues should not be able to go to Mars. It depends on criminal background. Technically, I'll be open with you. Technically, I have a criminal background. I'm a recovering drug addict, and even though I was never thrown into jail, I broke the law hundreds of times. Excuse me. Should that mean that that I should be banned from going to Mars because I've been, even though I've been clean for a substantial amount of time? It depends on how we define criminal background. Mental health issues, yeah, it depends on what the mental health issue is. But yeah, there are some very serious ones that people should be screened out. People with problems that cannot be managed. Yes, I would say definitely. Those folks would be very dangerous to bring to Mars. Juhid, hello. Common, giving a minimum living exchange to people without any expectation of effort. I believe you. Okay, you're quoting FTL. This has been proven very true in Finland with the government's social support. Alcoholics love it. Well, yeah, that's true in Finland, but then again, in Finland, you don't have to, survival is not so difficult. You can just sleep on the street in Finland with your bottle and do just fine. You can't do that on Mars. ZZ Top, they could build huge motherships orbiting the moons with resources from the asteroid belt. That's an interesting idea. Part of the economy, I suppose, is what you're saying. Question, says FTL, do you think a mercantile government would actually be the more ideal base for government on Mars? That whole mining the belt thing just seems to be the opportunity for Mars to establish long-term economic clout. Yes, a mercantile government based on taking advantage of the asteroid belt and the insane amount of resources that are there is something that Mars should definitely take advantage of. Now it has been very important in Finland, and people like I'm not going to identify who says this, have been saved at one point by it. But there are always the lazies. And yes, I mean, when it comes right down to it, I've been saved by unemployment. After being laid off for the second time, I've been dependent on unemployment since April. Of course, I haven't stayed idle. I've been doing this. But nevertheless, it's made a difference. FTL, hasn't NASA dramatically improved the gravity exercise situation? It may be very doable to return to Earth. For somebody born there, I don't know. Maybe. I think the only way for us to find out is to go there and then to have children born there and see how they can adapt to a 1G environment, which we can artificially create if they were to exercise in it on a regular basis. So yeah, that might be a solution, FTL. ZZ Top, it's one of the things Mars will do for us. But when Elon gets there, what's to stop him from creating his own nuclear power and his own nuclear engines? Well, and before Mars becomes self-sufficient, I would say the Atomic Energy Commission can stop him, simply because if he's still relying on Earth for anything, they can cut that off. Mars will become its own planet at that point if he decides to build a um, nuclear power plants and become a nuclear power without permission from Earth. There's a lot of action that Earth could take against his assets there. But once Mars becomes self-sufficient and Elon doesn't care about what happens on Earth, then yeah, he can do pretty much whatever the hell he wants. I will always employ someone lazy, over the top achiever, as a lazy person will find the quickest way to do a job. Bill Gates. Interesting, an interesting quote. How about that? Bill Gates. Well, that's an interesting quote from a very successful man in the corporate world. I didn't know he said that. Thank you very much, another space nut. And thank you, another space nut, for doing all the moderation and help that you do on this channel. I really do appreciate that. Okay, Eugenius, there should not be any political parties, only campaigns for positions in the government. That way you can more easily bar corruption from erupting, and if such person does not do his job well, he can be put out of charge easily as a second mistake or something along those lines. Eliminating political parties, I'm not opposed to that. Political parties have been a huge pain in my country. It's kept us from getting anything done. The amount of the amount of flat out hatred between Democrats and Republicans in the United States has prevented any decisions from taking place. Will intoxicants be allowed, says Don Van Vliet. I don't see how we prevent it. If you can grow hops and if you can grow grapes in the Martian soil, you're going to be able to create alcohol. And if you ban it, then it's going to create a massive underground criminal network. Even though alcohol has its problems, and I think being drunk on the job is going to be a really serious danger. I would say trying to ban alcohol is going to be a serious issue. And by the way, the Russians have been smuggling vodka to their own space stations for a long time before the ISS was created. As a matter of fact, they may still be doing it, from my knowledge. And so far, they haven't had any disasters as a result of bringing alcohol onto their stations. But then again, any Russian would say that's because we can hold our liquor, so who knows? ZZ Top, I'm definitely getting stoned on Mars. Well, I'll leave that to you, but it's certainly something we could do. We can grow those sorts of things on Mars. Follow-up comment, innovation competition. Elon Musk likes the US because of its model of fostering innovators. Yeah, I would say that we do have a good system of fostering innovators. However, our system leaves a lot of people behind. Our educational system is one of the worst in the world. So yeah, there's a lot of innovative people, and then there's a lot of people who don't innovate at all, as a result of their financial or family situation. So we do a lot of things well here in the United States, but we don't do everything well. Another comment made, I have a huge criminal background and bipolar, but still trying to go. Yeah, I would say, in my opinion, if you've done if you've done your service to society, if you have, paid the price for whatever criminal act that you committed, I would say going to Mars should still be open to you. That's a personal opinion. And then Eugenius replies, assault, hate crimes, murder, theft, etc. Yeah. I would agree with the first three. Theft is something that is also, although I've never done it myself, it's something that's committed by drug addicts in order to feed their addiction. And once again, they do it because they have to. If you've ever been in withdrawal from heroin, as I have, take the worst flu you have ever had and multiply it by 1,000,000,000. That's how much pain you're in. And you'll do anything to get rid of that pain. So as a result,
committing theft to get rid of that pain and buy what you need may be a possibility. Boy, I'm falling behind here. I really appreciate all the contributions. Campaigns. The problem is that people with a common cause will always gather and collaborate. Yeah. Part of the human condition, says Don Van Vliet, is that it's self-medication. Surely that will come along with us. Yes, that's true. As long as there's pills and painkillers of some kind on Mars, there's going to be people abusing it. I think that there's almost no way of avoiding that. Unless we decide to not bring any sort of painkillers along with us, and that's going to be a real problem. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, unemployment is not the same thing. I contributed into it. Yeah, that's a good point. Being unemployed is not the same thing as welfare. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that means. However, if we have what's necessary to at least allow somebody to be fed and they're trying to contribute, I just don't think we're going to run into this problem on Mars. I really don't, at least not for a very long time. I think there's always going to be something to that people are going to have to do to contribute to a place as harsh as Mars is. Penalties for smuggling contraband to Mars. Well, I think we're going to have a Martian jail of some kind. I think there's going to be no other way around it. Or perhaps some isolated research station or something along those lines. Those sorts of things. Violent criminal background would be a better description on the prohibition they would have. Mental problems, there are many and should be studied by psychologists. If you have to think how dangerous it would be if somebody just goes nuts and opens the habitat door, says Eugenius. Yes, I agree. Somebody with extremely serious psychological problems that cannot be managed, that sort of screening has to exist. And violent criminal background has to be excluded. I agree with that as well. So in any event, we're trying to get caught up here. Wow, lots of comments. Thank you so much for all of this contribution. Clauders again, better hope nobody develops depression on the long, hard trip to Mars. Otherwise, you'll need to turn them back. Yes, I think if somebody develops depression, we're going to need psychiatrists on Mars in a big way. I would say that people who go to Mars with a pie in the sky idea of the adventure behind going to this planet and then all of a sudden experience what it's really like, they may encounter some very serious issues with depression. And I think psychiatric help is going to be a very important part of a successful Martian colony. Okay, let's see here. Okay, individual position campaigns, random office dates rather than appointments is an interesting model. Running for a campaign as an individual rather than for a party. I had another idea. Why not elect people into positions who offer the population a number of decisions? In other words, all right, you've elected me to narrow down the number of choices that our government has. Do we do this or this or this or this? Now let's have a real-time vote on what decision that we make. So we have a bit of a representative government, but the final decision is in the hands of the people. But the representatives make the decision on what the people vote for. Okay, why being lazy and procrastinating can make you wildly successful. Thank you for throwing that link in there, another space nut. Once again, the links will be available on Discord after the conclusion of the event. Seeker of knowledge, I plan to retire to Mars and be an apothecary. Medicinal plants, and yes, marijuana is a medicinal plant. Yes, it definitely is. As a native of Colorado, I completely agree. And as a person who lives in South Carolina, this place really pisses me off. But yes, marijuana is something that should not be seriously restricted. Okay, depression quite normal. Problem comes with people reach paranoia or hallucinations. That's a very, very serious condition. And those sorts of things are easily identified by trained psychiatrists before somebody goes. Anybody who has paranoia or hallucinations, in my opinion, should be weeded out. Those sorts of people require extremely powerful drugs in order to keep their problem under control and can be a very serious liability. Okay, what about ZZ Top? What about just using cryptocurrency? And we could have a physical device like an SD card to hold it, but specialized so we can use it like our debit card. It's an interesting idea. Why not? I think that's a pretty cool idea there, ZZ Top. And yes, Clouders, I agree with you. Mental health professionals are mandatory for the first trip. Sorry about taking a sip on a regular basis. I just get a dry throat from talking nonstop. And I've been talking nonstop for 40 minutes. We still have quite a ways to, or no, let's see here. Yeah, we still have quite a ways to go in this discussion. How about that? That's awesome. Okay, seeker of knowledge, Martian law or the penalty for violating a law will have a simple solution. Out the airlock they will go. Well, I have a feeling that there's going to be so many people who are against the death penalty, who are a part of a Martian colony, that execution is something that's going to be a very difficult thing to get the people to go for. Unless the majority of people are made up of people from Texas or from my state, South Carolina, the vast majority of the world has given up on the death penalty. So I would say perhaps maybe a research station in an isolated place on the poles or something along those lines. Okay. Crimes involving non-infringing actions are really just black market indications of onerous regulation, says FTL. Yes, that's entirely possible. I would say we need to really define what contraband actually is. Thank you, Don Van Leet. I'm not going to say exactly what you said, but nevertheless, I appreciate what you just said to me. Thank you for that. Juhid, weed and mental health caused paranoia is quite different. Well, yeah, that's probably true. Another space nut, if you were caught smuggling things to Mars, would you be charged as a space pirate? Only if you say R in the process of doing it, in my opinion. It really depends on what you're smuggling and what sort of taxes you're imposing and that sort of thing. Things that we're bringing in that are completely unnecessary and are costing a huge amount per kilogram to bring, perhaps that's smuggling. But then again, if the person on Mars is paying for it in some way, maybe it isn't. It's hard to say. Something that represents a danger to the colony, on the other hand, that's something that could definitely be defined as smuggling. Can we bring cats or dogs? I need animals in my life. I would say if we bring a few species along and have them reproduce, and if we're able to support them, why not? There's a lot of psychological evidence to prove that cats and dogs and pet animals contribute tremendously to people's positive psychiatry. So I think pets are something that we should definitely bring along. Another space nut suggests, what about a spot, a robot dog? Who knows if people enjoy that sort of thing? They definitely do in Japan. Maybe that might be an alternative, although having something that really responds to you is definitely something that makes a big difference. Once again, guys, I'm sorry. Those of you who are part of the audience, thank you for being part of the audience. I am having a hard time keeping up with just what's on Discord. If you want to be part of the conversation, the link is in the description as to how to do that. FTL, should Mars institute tariffs from Earth? Should Mars institute tariffs from Earth? If it helps the economy, yes. If it doesn't help the economy, no. So really it all depends. ZZ Top replies, not for about 100 years. See all the pins, another space nut just pinned up all of the rather all the links that he just put up. So is it a good idea to have non-experts voting for the best course of action on big issues involving the entire habitation? This seems to lean towards a long-term military outpost government, actually, says FTL. You know, the very same argument was made in the 1930s that people who do not have the knowledge or the expertise to make informed decisions should not be part of the government. Unfortunately, those people were fascists. So I would say that that's a very dangerous and slippery slope to go towards. I would say everybody who's contributing towards the overall good of the economy, regardless of their intelligence or education, should have a say in the government. That's just my personal opinion. Okay, not if it endangers the survival of the colony, doesn't justify killing somebody in cold blood, says ZZ Top. Yeah. Okay. And once again, we were talking about capital punishment. We'll see. I don't know. It depends on how things go. We'll see. I'd be interested to see what Elon Musk thinks about capital punishment. I'm not sure if it exists in South Africa. Any South Africans out there? Do you know if capital punishment exists in that country? I don't know. I mean, obviously he considers himself an American these days, but I'd say he's heavily influenced by his country of origin. Have you looked at the Lunar Embassy Constitution? It was actually developed by a constitutional scholar and voted upon by the citizenry. I have not, FTL, and I will, and maybe I'll make a video about it. I know I always say those sorts of things, but a lot of you guys' contributions on Discord have actually become videos, as you may have noticed. So I'm going to see if I can look into that and perhaps make a video about it. Off topic, do you think new religions will arise in a new colony, ZZ Top? Absolutely, or hell yeah, as you say, Cyclonics. No question. I think that new religions are going to pop up. Depends on what it is, depends on whether or not we discover evidence of intelligent life beyond the solar system. Personally, I think we already have strong evidence for that, although I'm not going to get into that right now. And by the way, I'm not talking about UFOs, I'm talking about other things. Okay, all right, this was dropped in general chat, but Don Van Vliet would like to hear my take on it. Werner von Braun's prediction about Elon, I've seen this actually. Martian government was directed by 10 men, the leader of whom was elected by universal suffrage for 5 years and entitled Elon. 2 houses of parliament enacted by the laws to be administered by Elon and his cabinet. The upper house was called the Council of the Elders and was limited to a membership of 60 persons. That is Werner von Braun's take on a Martian government. Very interesting. And I haven't had a chance to check up on this particular article, and I'm going to see whether to fact check this particular issue to see how accurate that is. Werner von Braun had a lot of great ideas when it came to colonizing Mars. However, we also have to remember the other side of the coin. Werner von Braun was pretty much single-handedly responsible for the development of the V2 and all the British civilians that were killed by that particular intermediate range ballistic missile. So in any event, a lot of positives for that guy, but some negatives as well. Okay. FTL, how do you reconcile the requirements on living on Mars with a no death penalty model? Everyone has to contribute to the survival of the society. Violence and psychotic people happen and will kill. People who do not believe harm towards their fellows will have a hard time with forced labor, etc. Yes, FTL, I would tend to agree with that. There are, however, many countries, many countries, the United Kingdom being one of them, and most European countries actually, that don't have the death penalty. Whereas the United States, of course, does have the death penalty, but so does the People's Republic of China, and so does Russia. I mean, does that mean that there's no crime in those countries? Certainly not in Russia. We have a massive criminal problem in Russia, even though the death penalty exists. So I'm not necessarily saying that the death penalty is going to be a catch-all solution for these problems. Assuming China makes it to Mars, says Cyclonics, and also sets up a colony, how likely is it there will be cooperation between SpaceX, NASA, and other international partners in a Chinese colony? Boy, that's a loaded question, Cyclonics, and one that I anticipated. If you were to ask the NASA astronauts who have cooperated with the taikonauts, they would say that there will be cooperation because that there is no Tiananmen Square, because there's no massive number of Chinese who are going to execute the people who decide to collaborate with other Martian colonists on Mars. There isn't going to be the same kind of compulsion to get taikonauts to operate in opposition to NASA and SpaceX colonists. On the other hand, the Chinese government could threaten the families of these taikonauts on Earth in order to compel their obedience. The fact that the Chinese Space Agency is a military organization, this could lead to serious problems in the future. Then again, it could be the first element of the People's Republic of China having a truly independent government. It's really hard to say, but a big loaded question and perhaps one of the most dangerous. But nevertheless, I'd say that there's probably no way to stop China from developing their own presence on Mars. Let's just hope they decide to play nice. That's all I can say. Secret Knowledge TV show Orville had an episode with direct democracy. Everybody voted on everything. The vast majority decided that the facts were wrong because it was not popular. Interesting question, and probably loaded because of our current situation in our own country in the United States where Orville is made, where scientific beliefs are not adopted by the majority or by a large number rather, of the American population because scientific beliefs are not popular. I don't think that that's going to be the case with Martian colonists. I think Martian colonists are going to be big believers in science. Otherwise, why would they go? Why would they believe that science can provide all the answers when it comes to their day-to-day survival? Because they are going to be seriously relying on science to survive. I strongly doubt that there's going to be any of these conspiracy nuts that don't believe in science that are going to decide to make the trip to Mars. Just an opinion, but nevertheless, it could happen. It could happen. Fascist who votes comment in an open ecosystem, says FTL. Your comment on fascism is true. In a closed life support system environment, it is not fascism, it is survival. Von Braun's government sounds a lot like Hong Kong today. True, although the one drawback with Hong Kong is that the Chinese do have the ultimate choice to kick out the Hong Kong government should they decide to do that. They're not going to do it for economic reasons, but nevertheless, if they decide to do that, they could. So that's the one drawback to the Hong Kong setup. Okay, another space nut just printed another thing about the Elon name and the prediction associated with space travel, etc. So that's going to be part of the links going up on Discord if you want to check all of this out. Once again, a Patreon supporter, you do a lot towards contributing towards the future of this channel. $3 a month isn't very much, and you can become part of the discussion and part of the links that are going up here. Plus, you can ask me questions directly. DM me anytime, and I guarantee you I will get back to you within 24 to 48 hours, unless I'm sick or something along those lines. Von Braun was an idealist, says FTL. Yes, he was, but unfortunately under the thumb of Hitler, and not so much of an idealist that he was willing to give up his life to refuse to develop the V2. He was an idealist, yes. Do I respect the man? Yes. Was he responsible for a weapon that killed thousands of British citizens? Yes. And that fact cannot be undone. Von Braun also Don Van Vliet wrote a fictionalized story about his proposal in German, which was translated into English but wasn't published until 2006, after his death. It was published as Project Mars, a technical tale, and a book which contains the reference to Elon. It is available as a free PDF. I have to wonder whether or not Elon's parents had access to this same information. Very, very interesting. So, sorry for the loaded question, says Cyclone. No, this is a question that I expected and one that I wanted. Russia has the most serial killers jailed in the world, says Judith. Yes, that's very true, and they also have the death penalty. And it hasn't made a whole lot of difference as far as their ability to control crime. In terms of who executes the most people, I believe it's the United States, and our crime rate is still quite high. So nevertheless, whether or not the death penalty is going to make a difference to the future of a Martian colony and make it a better or worse place, it's hard to say. Being a person that would probably never do anything that would get myself executed, I tend to be biased, but nevertheless, it depends on what we decide the death penalty should be for. All right, we'll keep going. It's a question of morals. Would it be okay to have a dog that would always live in a habitat? I would say so, as long as you provide for that dog, as long as you take responsibility for it. If your dog gets out of control and starts creating chaos in the habitat, then there's an easy solution to the problem. I hate to put it that way, but you have to be responsible for your own animal if you bring it to Mars. But there's a lot of positive reasons to bring pets to Mars for psychological reasons alone. Excuse me. Given that Elon's founding of a city on Mars will not occur in a vacuum, isn't it altruistic that non-political thoughts for Mars is simply not realistic? It all depends. Will Elon's founding of a city on Mars occur in a vacuum or not? Who else is going to do it? Is NASA really going to establish a self-sustaining presence on Mars, or is it going to be a research base? It's hard to say. Currently, Elon seems to be the only guy who has the interest in establishing a self-sustaining long-term presence on Mars. Everybody else seems to have the interest in establishing, rotating researchers, and that's about the extent of it. So it's hard to say as to whether or not there's going to be multiple self-sustaining cities on Mars. There could be. Don Van Vliet, my dog lives happily in an environment dictated by myself. Well, if you're able to do it, I would say yes. Absolutely. If we're going to bring psychiatrists, why not bring animals that can contribute to the psychological well-being of the Martian people? Do you think that religious science will develop on Mars as it has in the US and the UN? Quite possible. If we're talking about the whole Dianetics sort of thing, Scientology, I don't know about that one. That's an interesting question, but I would say that there's a good chance of it. Yeah, there's wealthy people who believe in that sort of thing and might very well make the trip to Mars. Very hard to say. If you grow a dog from a puppy on Mars, it only knows the habitat and will be utterly happy, says Juhid. Yes, that's very true. Dog will be doing backflips, says ZZ Top. You're right, in 1/3 gravity. Very true. Okay. All right. All right. I'm not going to repeat what you just said, another space nut. But nevertheless, I tend to agree with part of what you're saying. I tend to agree with part of what you're saying. Okay, a significant part of it. Elon was named after his great grandfather, apparently, says Don Van Vliet. Wow, that's spooky, isn't it? That adds to the theory that some people make on the ancient aliens thing, that the aliens were helping the Nazis, and that's how they were able to develop these V2s and the rocket technology, because they were able to see the future. Any justice system would have to be quick on Mars. Well, perhaps, but the quick solution could be you get to go to the research outpost in the middle of the Valles Marineris and cook for the rest of the researchers. That's your sentence. Or you go to jail. That's your other sentence. So that could, there's a variety of different ways of have to look at evidence, have trials, due process, says ZZ Top. I agree with that. A trial by your peers is something that the United States and just about every civilized system on this planet does, and it absolutely has to happen on Mars as well. A trial of your peers is something that needs to be done. By the way, should the sentence also be from your peers, or should a judge that understands the legal system be issuing the sentence? I'm curious as to your opinions on that, because my late father-in-law, one of the finest men I ever knew, was a judge and handed out the sentences and did so very fairly. Should those judges be issuing the sentences because they understand the law, or should the sentences be made by the jurists? Very interesting question. I'd be interested as to your opinion, and I'm going to have to catch up in order to do that. Would not have the facilities for long-term prisoners on Mars, especially at first. Well, dig yourself a cave. Specifically for that purpose, and put them subsurface. And I'll tell you something, putting somebody underground for a long period of time, or for a period of time, and they're going to shape up rather quickly. At least I would say that there's a strong possibility for that. If you're familiar with The Expanse, do you think the Martian Congressional Republic is a likely outcome of Martian independence? Yes, I would, Cyclonics. I would say that that's a strong possibility. I think that The Expanse is a very prophetic book or series of books and series. Aside from the conflict side of it, and the fact that the different aspects of of human civilization, and the different strains of humans that are created by the colonization of the solar system ultimately go to war with each other. Very dark vision of the future when it comes to that, but it makes for a good series of books, makes for a good series. I hope it doesn't happen, but it could. It very much could. Another space nut. Bezos wants space stations the size of planets so that we can go on vacation there. Yes, Jeff Bezos, and I have said this before on at least one of the videos that I have made. He wants these huge orbiting stations in the same way that a particular movie that stars Matt Damon anticipates that people orbiting the Earth will have an idyllic environment to live in while the people on Earth go to hell. I would say that it's entirely possible that that's what he's looking towards. Now, going on vacation there, yeah, possibly, but only for the very rich. Jeff Bezos has become incredibly rich, and everything he's doing so far seems to be oriented towards that. Not exporting the dangerous industries on the planet. We haven't made any serious moves towards that so far, but we've made moves on spending lots of money on sending space tourists into orbit, or rather suborbital flight so far, although he has yet to successfully do that either. Do you think the rest of the world, China, North Korea, countries with limited land and lots of people, will see Elon's success on Mars and then launch 1,000 ships to establish their own colonies at that point? Well, it will be a difficult undertaking for them, to say the least, given especially North Korea. They don't have the economy or the technological ability, in my opinion, to build that kind of capability. Their intermediate range ballistic missiles have problems enough as it is. I think it would be a miracle if they could create a ship that was capable of going to Mars. But nevertheless, you're going to hear a chainsaw in the background now. People are hard at work on a Sunday morning, very considerate of them. So in any event, that is what it is. Not everyone will be a prisoner until they're found guilty, and then they just have a punishment, probably not just sit there doing nothing. I agree. I would say the best punishment, once again, is being sent to a research colony and then doing some sort of menial chores for the researchers. I would say that would be punishment enough, and that sort of thing. Okay, Don Van Vliet, will orbiting stations have the same laws? Does Earth law extend to the ISS? Technically, mercantile law extends to outer space. However, Earth law does extend to the ISS because NASA, the Roscosmos, etc., all of the people who are on the ISS are subject to their regulations, including the private astronauts who go there, I believe. They have to sign agreements that they're subject to those regulations as well. But as far as private space stations are concerned, I would say that they're subject to the regulations that the corporations who build them are going to set up. Okay, another space nut. I'm an ex-chef. It would do if it's the only way that I could get to Mars. Charge me as a space pirate and force me to cook, says another space nut. Well, we're going to need cooks, aren't we? I think it's going to contribute to the psychological well-being of the Martian colonists and the Martian colony in general if they have good quality food. Having quality of food as opposed to eating algae every day is going to make for a happier colony. So I would say that a talented chef is going to be a necessity in a Martian colony. So why not? ZZ Top, by the way, just answered my question, made by an elected judge. And I tend to agree. Elected judges understand the law and are qualified to enact sentences. However, I'm biased because I believed I believe that my late father-in-law is one of the finest men that I ever knew. I am finally starting to catch up. Okay, over the next 10 years, we are expected to see the world's first trillionaires. Yes, probably true, from the people who exploit the asteroids, and the asteroid belt can be easily exploited from Mars. If you've watched my video on 16 Psyche, that shows just how much wealth that there is in the asteroid belt, and how easy it can be to create trillionaires by mining asteroids. So the Martian colony could become incredibly wealthy by providing the rare minerals and other necessities that Earth is going to require in order to maintain its current level of civilization, especially to a growing population. Okay, Clotters. Mars colony will have no place for someone to stand apart from the rest of the colony. Crime will hopefully stay very low, down to absolute dependency on your fellow colonists. Or you at least you would hope that it will be the case. Yes, Clotters, I agree with you. Because people will have to rely on each other. And because if you're deciding to go to a place where the conditions are that harsh, your level of idealism is going to be that well developed. At least I certainly hope so. And you just advanced to level 1, Clotters, because of your recent contributions to Discord. Thank you very much. In the 90s, there were just a few, billionaires in the world. There are a lot of nouveau riche, but nevertheless, you're right. There are a lot more millionaires today than there were in the 90s. FTL question. Amazon has been a huge economic engine for small businesses around the world. Do you think I'm being a little hard on Bezos? I'm going to continue being hard on that guy until he actually puts something into orbit. When he puts something into orbit, I'll lay off of him. It's as simple as that. He's had almost 2 decades to develop this space company of his, and this slow and steady approach of his has yet to put humans into suborbital flight, let alone orbital flight. He's had plenty of time to do something substantial. And he's talking about putting a lander on the moon that is mostly not reusable. I'm going to keep laying into the guy until he proves me wrong. It's as simple as that. But then again, I'm biased. So what can you do? Okay. Another Space Nut says, if I list an item for Prime and fulfill shipping myself, Amazon takes 20%. And then they fulfill its 40% of profit from the item. So yeah, Amazon takes a big chunk of money if you list it on Prime, and that's how Jeff Bezos has made himself wealthy. But at the same time, he has created a lot of small businesses. So yeah, I mean, I can't deny that. But at the same time, his space company, and given the amount of enormous wealth that that man has at his disposal, he should have accomplished a lot more by now, and he hasn't. When he actually puts something into orbit, when his New Glenn rocket actually flies, then I'm going to lay off of him. But until then, I'm going to keep letting him have it. So that's off topic, by the way. That's not governmental. I need to shut up about that. Okay. All right. Long duration space simulations show that food is vital for morale. If eating potatoes all day lasts for 400 plus days, it takes a toll on you mentally. Well, obviously it did in The Martian. So yes, you make a very good point there. I'm just bringing Dunkaroos, says ZZ Top. Okay, Judith. Question. Do you think that in Mars and its harsh environment, the primal parts of the brain that have gone partially dormant from the easy days on Earth will reactivate on Mars? I sure as hell hope not. I think that rather our instinct to support each other in order to survive, because we're going to have to rely on each other to survive. If one guy decides, you know what, I'm going my own way, well, if he doesn't understand how the life support system works, what's going to happen to him? If he doesn't understand the necessity, if he doesn't understand how to grow the food, how is he going to survive? If he doesn't understand how to recycle the water, how is he going to live? If he doesn't understand how to take advantage of the resources that Mars provides to remove the perchlorates from the soil, how is he going to survive? So I would say no, our darker instincts are not going to take over. And again, I am an idealist and I could be wrong. If our dark instincts do take over, I think that the first Martian colony is in for a short, brutish, and harsh future that isn't going to last very long. So I certainly hope that that doesn't happen. Okay, let's keep going. Do you think all Martian citizens will be able to access news and social media coming from Earth? I'm not certain. The Chinese may decide to block it, as they block a lot of information, and that may be why you asked that question. Oh, another loaded question. However, if NASA is providing a lot of the transmissions to Earth and the Chinese are able to set up their own receivers, then they can receive any social media that they want to. So that would be a way for them to bypass the way that they filter the social media that comes to them right now. So that may be a way for them to free themselves from the oppressive society that they live under right now. It's hard to say. Mars has millions of ways to die, says another space nut, and only one way to survive. The irony of Blue Origin is the mission statement forward aggressively, says another space nut. Yes, I do tend to agree. If Blue Origin has failed to put a single thing into orbit, or has not put humans into suborbital flight, they haven't done anything aggressively yet. Okay, I'm going to shut up about Blue Origin. All right. Seems like a few of us can't agree that these laws and governments should be. Is there an official body working on this, says Don Van Vliet. I don't know. I'm going to check on that. Honestly, I doubt it. But yes, I would say it's possible. There may be some organizations looking at it. Pardon me, we have about 15 minutes left. I'm going to try to catch up with these questions. How long do you think HAB leaders will serve in their roles? Well, if we do elect HAB leaders, it really depends on what people decide, and I think that that should be decided by popular vote, the number of years that they would serve in their role. I'm actually not opposed to the notion of people serving term after term, so long as the majority decides to keep them there. I don't think mandatory term limitations are necessary if people continue to vote for the same people. However, if people are silly enough to keep doing that, then they can continue to elect the same leaders. However, that's why I think direct democracy is so important. These leaders, all they do is select a number of different choices for the general population, and then the general population votes on these decisions as to what the government should do. And if the people decide that the leaders are not putting forward the right decisions, then they kick them out. That's what I would advocate. But nevertheless, second and third generation Martians will decide how government will be shaped, says Seeker of Knowledge. Yes, I would say that that could be very possible. Question follow-up. What do you think ex-leaders will do after they serve in their term? Well, in Britain, a prime minister can actually continue to serve in their party as a member of parliament. I think that a leader could still serve in some sort of governmental role. It really depends on what they decide to do. If they're good at serving as a leader, then perhaps they should serve in some other governmental function. So, in any event, it looks like somebody else just joined on. A Sith engineer. Air will be used as a threat, just like in Total Recall. Love that movie. So if we end up with factions on Mars, they will be in trouble. Well, it depends on whether or not the people who control the air decide to use that as a source of enforcing their will. So yes, if somebody manages to get control of the environment on Mars, yes, they can become the new dictators of Mars. Let's hope that nobody manages to do that. ZZ Top says, seems like a few of us can't agree on what these laws of governments should be as their official body. Okay, we can agree, you just don't want to continue debating. Well, I think that we just like debating right now because we're talking about what the government should be. I think after a significant amount of debating, then yeah, I think that ultimately there should be some sort of government that should be decided upon. FTL says, I really want to see a huge telescope facility on Olympus Mons. I wouldn't mind either. With almost no atmosphere obstructing it, I think that that would be a really cool telescope facility. Another space nut is trying to write policies for the first Martian Internet Council. I'd be interested in seeing that. FTL just recommended to look at the Lunar Embassy's work, so yes, I will look at that, FTL. ZZ Top says, I'm okay. Another space nut just responded to ZZ Top. Says that when he says he's trying to write policies for the first Martian Internet Council. All right, I'm still trying to catch up here. FTL says the lower house should be like a draft, random and only repeatable once everyone has gone through the process. Yes, that is another very doable form of government, but one that should only be agreed upon by the people. Once again, by direct democracy. I do believe that, once again, I guess I tend to go along with Elon Musk, and I tend to be pretty biased towards direct democracy. Will we get public holidays? Asks Cyclonics. Hell yeah, absolutely we should have public holidays, although they should rotate because we're going to have people always maintaining the machinery. So some people will get certain public holidays and other groups of the population are going to get other public holidays. I think that in any event, yes, I think everybody's been bringing up good points, by the way. So by all means, I think that this has been a very lively discussion. So in any event, a paid holiday. Well, it depends on whether or not we have a monetary system on Mars. But yes, why should we be penalized for having a holiday? Certainly, absolutely. So no pay for holidays, but if you work on that day, you should get overtime, says ZZ Top. My, we're getting very specific in what we're talking about. With the critical need for air, will smoking be allowed? Tobacco, pot, clothes, etc. Let's have smoking sections, I say. And then we'll go ahead and have the smoke filtered out into the Martian atmosphere where we don't give a damn where the smoke goes. I think smoking areas should be a possibility if people really want to go ahead and do that. Although, because denying the right to smoke is just going to create an underground where people are going to grow tobacco and sell it on the black market. So I think banning cigarettes is something that simply is not going to be feasible. It would be desirable. I'm not a smoker myself, but yeah, nevertheless, a smoking room, or rather perhaps a smoking habitat. You need to put on a spacesuit, bring your cigarettes with you, and go smoke in that habitat and let the smoke go out into the Martian atmosphere. Why not? It might encourage people to stop smoking. Who knows? How as we as Earthlings decide on a Martian government? True, says Seeker of Knowledge. We should not decide on a Martian government. The Martians should decide their own form of government. Mars for the Martians, or the Martian way, as I like to say. And it was the title of one of my favorite short stories. I think Mars should set up their own form of government. But we shall see, depending on who gets to Mars first, as to what kind of government we have set up. Okay, Mars government should be planned out years in advance. Well, yes, that's probably true. Okay, working hours, paid in oxygen. Oh, angry astronaut for the first Martian president. Thank you so much, but you would not want me to be the first Martian president because I tend to get angry too often. All right, ZZ Top. Should the Mars government mandate working hours? Mandated minimum tasks completed not by hours. Everybody should have a role to complete, a role to undertake. And so as long as you carry out your role, work smart rather than hard, I would say should definitely be the case. Smoking areas equals open flame, says FTL. I would tend to agree, and that's why I think a separate smoking habitat should, with its own isolated life support system, should set up. So in other words, if the smokers end up killing themselves, well, it would be a terrible tragedy, but nevertheless one that would not end up with somebody else suffering for their mistake. So never, not to say that I would like to see that happen to smokers, but nevertheless, open flames could be a real problem, and perhaps a strong reason to have those vape things. Okay, black market could cause a danger to life support and many other things, says ZZ Top. Yes, I agree, and so therefore there should not be a black market. We should not encourage a black market. Will gambling and prostitution be legal or not, and why, says FTL. Well, I would say prostitution, I'm not a big fan, and the reason for that is because of pimps. Um, Prostitutes tend to get abused. It's so far anyway, and perhaps with the small exception of what happens in Las Vegas, prostitution tends to result in women getting abused in one degree or another. Should gambling be legal? Yes, I would say so. But at the same time, I say that without a whole lot of personal knowledge because I've never had a gambling addiction problem. And what are you going to use for currency when it comes to gambling? So hard to say, hard to say. But yeah, I mean, prostitution has been called a victimless crime, but it isn't, as a matter of fact. Having worked in the recovery industry for quite some time, prostitution has a lot of victims, and something that's going to need to be seriously regulated if we decide to make it legal. Elon for Martian Premier. Yes, and I would say that that is something that Elon is trying to avoid, is to become the first Martian dictator, shall we say. And that's why he likes the idea of direct democracy, so that he doesn't become the first Martian dictator. Electric lighters, says Seeker of Knowledge. Hey, maybe that's something that could happen. And if we smoke weed, we could call the smoking habitat the hot box. I like that. Another space nut. Yes, but yeah, you're right. Seeker of Knowledge, no flame, and so that's why. Yeah, I would say that would be the electric lighters might be another possibility. Clouders just said Don and Seeker make good points on who or how a government should be formed, and get the point on it would need to be formed in advance of going, but the colony would need full autonomy to change this to suit their existence at their own pace. I agree. Mars for the Martians, and I'm going to keep saying that until I get to Mars myself, hopefully. If we allow prostitution, then it will be regulated and clean. Yes, let's hope so. Let's certainly hope so. Because thus far, it's been very hard to establish a system of prostitution that's been that way. But perhaps we can make that happen. Prostitution like in the Total Recall movie, says Net Shaman. Yes, it is victimless if it is made legal. Yes, that's entirely possible. Once again, I don't know how they do it in Nevada. So hopefully it is victimless if they do it that way there. I really have no idea. Do they have legal prostitution regulated legal prostitution in Germany? I have no idea. Cyclonics, I imagine having children will be heavily regulated by the government early on. Yes, I agree, especially until we determine what 1/3 gravity is going to do to Martian children. Okay. Let's see. there was only legal curb crawling zone, and crime there dropped by 15%. When Amsterdam legalized sex work, it also reduced crime by 30%. So yes, maybe legalized prostitution is the way to go. I guess I'm prejudiced because I've seen so many people who have been legalized by, or rather victimized by prostitution. But yes, if it is legalized and regulated, then in Finland we have legal prostitution, no pimps, and legal, and you pay tax for it. Well, how about that? Well, then perhaps it is a perfectly good means, in which case we're going to need Martian prostitutes. Oh Lord, how about that? And in Canada, as long as the girls are independent, as long as they're legal, no pimps allowed. Well, yes, I think so. Can windows on habitats be radiation proof if they're made with transparent aluminum? Well, I'm not certain about that, Net Shaman. But one thing we can do with windows on habitats is use either ice or water that is circulating in order to provide radiation protection. However, we're getting off topic with that one. And we are almost out of time. We've blown through 90 minutes. How about that? And we still have 70 people watching. I am thrilled to see that. Oldest professions, including prostitution. Yes, I tend to agree. Okay, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Okay, so we are back to, I'm almost to the point where I'm going to allow one more comment or question. Okay, transparent aluminum exists today. U.S. Air Force came up with it 10 years ago. How about that? So after Scotty made his famous statement, thank you very much. Okay, we have 2 people typing, and I will allow for a couple of real quick comments. So, and then I'm going to need to say au revoir. Mars or bust. Yes, indeed. This is what I talk about. It is real, absolutely. Keeping things real, which is why I like doing these sorts of things, and I encourage more of you to keep participating in an active way. Thank you so much for everybody who has been part of the audience, everybody who has been part of the contribution. What part of South Carolina am I in? I'm in the upstate, the buckle of the Bible Belt. And I must say, and I'm sorry if I offend anybody, I hate it here. So, having said all that, I'm afraid I'm going to have to close out by saying, as always, stay angry about space. Thank you, guys.